Thanks so much, Andrew. Thanks for being here today and for asking me to speak. I actually, if you look at the program, the title is actually slightly different, but that's fine. Sometimes ideas are evolving and you need to kind of be adaptable for those. Well, we're not going to stay on that format though, because I had kind of already been working on this. And at the end of the day, a little context before I kind of start. Very little. As Chandra said, I work at Sapient Nitro, sort of a global design, marketing, and technology company. It's about 10,000 people, 35 offices, and our London office is actually the biggest office in the Western world. And we're always hiring, so you should definitely kind of take a look at us. I think we're doing some good things. I happen to be a director of experience strategy and lead kind of strategist in that capacity for Europe. And we've got a great team. In terms of where I come from, because I think it's really important for you to know where people come from to kind of know what they're talking about, because that's that additional context. I went to University of Chicago as an undergrad, and I got a degree in psychology and also one in anthropology. So I've kind of, my whole career has been obsessed with understanding people, their behaviors, and kind of their cultural context and otherwise. And then in my 30s, my early 30s, I got a master's at the Institute of Design in Chicago, which happens to be very focused on design planning and what is essentially design-led innovation. So I've obsessed about that so much. Obviously, we're in London. I live in London. I've lived here for 2 years, but you can tell that my accent is not British. I came here by way of Chicago and also spent a couple years in Silicon Valley working for Yahoo and then for SAP, doing things like rolling out agile processes and also just trying to increase the hit rate of innovation at those places, and have had success and also failure doing that. So a lot of scars. And I also wrote a book, about innovation, and I'm actually in the middle of a rewrite of Naked Innovation, and it's really just about how to create new products and services and other things, more pure innovation, maybe not a product or service, that ultimately will produce value in the world and ultimately make a company more competitive. So yeah, just this is in beta, this talk. Because this is actually some evolving thinking, but I thought it'd be useful to kind of share it with you and then maybe get your reaction and perspective. So I'd very much want to hear what you have to think about it. So, when you think about process, right, there's no way that you can think about process in creating new things, especially in a digital context, and not have heard about the Lean Startup and Eric Ries. There's no more talked about person or sort of way of doing work. And as we sit here at a conference, user-centered design, it's critical for us to say, as process evolve for looking at how to create new things, how do we basically bring that into our practice? But I would say that one of the things that's kind of happened with Mr. Ries lately, or perhaps I should call him Saint Eric, is that there's a lot of people who are developing almost a zealot-like kind of attitude about lean startup and how to do lean, and it's kind of remarkable. It's not noted only by me. This was an article by Wired earlier this year, and kind of talks a lot about how he's kind of, this whole type of thinking is kind of the new black, and it's really pushing down a lot of the kind of other ways of thinking, and it definitely affected UX. You cannot do search for lean UX. You'll find a lot of very new kind of pieces on it. And what you'll also find is there's a book by the guy who wrote that article, Jeff, coming out on lean UX on O'Reilly at the beginning of next year. So massively popular. It certainly seems to be catching on for sure. And all of these things are really meant to achieve something. And what that is basically to achieve ROI. The evolution of our process is meant to achieve a return on investment. At the end of the day, anything that we build, we need to spend money to go build it. And then we start making money, or we get some value in return, and then ultimately you want that return to be greater than your investment, hopefully much greater. So that's, pretty basic concept. But if you think about it, the evolution in process has mapped to trying to change the shape of this curve. So initially you had kind of totally waterfall processes where things were actually kind of, someone came up with an idea in a conference room, and then someone tried to go engineer it and create it and put it into a factory, and then the scientific method came out, and we actually timed the production in factories and made that incredibly efficient. So we were able to make this investment, the cost of creating product much less. Then later, user-centered design methods came out, and we actually said, oh, well, you know what? To make this part of the curve, the return, higher or longer, we actually need to make the things that we build be more fit for purpose for people. And we need to do that by understanding them. But to understand them, we actually need to invest more. It is a cost to spend money looking at people's behaviors, as we all know. And now I think it's a cost, easily justified cost. But what you have to realize is that a lot of the changes in process are really to change this curve, the shape of this curve. And then if you look at Agile, basically that's trying to say, hey, we actually want to do as little investment as possible and create value as quickly as possible, either to de-risk or to and validate that something is right, or to introduce something into the world and start creating value more quickly. So, and Lean Startup is no different, essentially. Lean Startup is, it's basically saying we want to just cut this as short as possible and start producing things that will guarantee we're going to have a return. And that's pretty interesting. And I think one of the things that, like all of these things except Lean, actually, Lean Startup, have basically done is they all followed in essentially a waterfall process. And that was that even Agile-like processes followed a somewhat waterfall process. And what I mean by that is that the decision of what we were building was already made, and really it was all about how we built something. The design process is typically really focused on the how and not the what. Now, some kind of innovation processes that pull design methods earlier in strategy might inform the what, but typically we focused on the how as practitioners. And as the slide says, there's lots of ways and kind of well-tested tools for making decisions on that. There's not nearly as many ways or kind of robust decision-making tools to kind of actually decide what we should go do initially. And at the end of the day, Lean Startup was absolutely created to address that gap. And direct quote from Eric's book, and I think really relevant in the context of this conference, startups exist not just to make stuff or make money or even serve customers. He very intentionally says that. They exist to learn how to build a sustainable business. So Lean methods are actually business-centered, not customer-centered. There's a lot of creating a business is about creating customers by understanding them, but it is very business-centered. That's what it's about. It's about creating something that can be a going concern, which isn't a bad thing. It's a great thing. Thank God for this thinking. It's really brilliant, and a lot less money is going to be wasted on startups. Now, in many ways, it's kind of just getting back to traditional business, right? Pre all the dot-com craziness, it's like you got to actually go make a business. You're not going to get necessarily, tens and hundreds of millions in funding before you've actually figured out if you can make any money, which I think is funny. It's like the latest word in process, yet at the same time, it's basically just make a good business. But I think one of the things is and I'm very intentional in kind of like making this out to be like a kind of a new black or kind of a new type of religion where people have to kind of glom on it and kind of be very single-minded and say it has to be done this way, and that's how a lot of the people act who are kind of from this new school of thinking. And I would actually say that there's a whole range of problems and opportunities, and we should take a couple look at those, a look at a few of them for a moment. So this This are some screenshots from the Intuit site who created TurboTax. And if you've read Eric's book or if you've seen him talk, he oftentimes talks about Intuit because they've really adopted lean startup kind of methods within this very big company. And this happens to be an example of something that was created through kind of lean startup means. And what it was is it's essentially an app. It's called SnapTax. And essentially what you do is you take a photo of your W-2 that you filled out, you answer a few questions, you review it in your phone, and you file. That's it. It's very simple. If you have a simple tax situation, you can basically file your taxes by your phone. It's pretty cool. And it was lean because when it initially came out, it didn't have TurboTax branding. It didn't have Intuit branding. It actually was introduced only in California, and it was a much simpler product. It was a minimum viable product in many ways, and they just wanted to prove it out. And they proved it out in something like January of 2010, and by January of 2011, they basically built it out to include all 50 states and branded it, and thusly this new product was born. But it's interesting because this product at its very heart actually bites at the heels of TurboTax, the primary product of the company. It actually basically takes customers away from their primary product, which is a thing that most companies are really not good at accepting. Intuit is a radical exception to the rule of that. So a couple other examples. And I don't know what just happened. New presenter. So another project that I've been working on for about a year and a half, Marks and Spencer's. So Marks and Spencer's storied brand, over 100 years old, a kind of a high street, icon. Is there anything more British? I mean, M&S, Marks and Sparks. It's a great company, gone through a lot of great highs and a few lows, but mostly highs. And I don't know if many of you realize, Marks Spencer, as the CIO says here, is a veneer. The site is a veneer on top of Amazon code. Marks & Spencer is actually Amazon. It's just painted to look like Marks & Spencer. They rent Amazon to have their digital properties, which is really interesting. And it's interesting for a number of reasons. It's interesting because Amazon is increasingly a competitor of Marks & Spencer's, as they say in the article, as well as really being built to be a web-only business or a digital-only business. So clearly that's a big problem. If you're Marks & Spencer's, you're not a long-tail, low-cost business that's digital only. You're a retailer with 700 stores in the UK, and you have a brand that's over 100 years old, and you have a story to tell about your products and the quality of those products, and you're not about low cost. So they made the decision to get off, and as you can see in the title, it says spend 9 figures on creating this digital platform, and my company is kind of leading a lot of that work. And at any rate, the coordination that is required to go do this is remarkable. There's no less than 7 major systems, like critical systems, like order management, their commerce system, their search system, their many other systems. They have to create a call center. They have to go create a whole series of things. We have to redo the entire user experience. So there are literally hundreds of people working around the clock, around the world, to try to get this live by 2014 when their contract with Amazon runs out. And this is all public, so I can say it. So massively complex, huge organizational change. So many disciplines have to come together, affects so many people. So radically different kind of project than the kind of TurboTax one. And then if you think about Vodafone as another example, they've had kind of a website experience that's been live for about 5 years. But they have a really interesting team, and that team is an analytics team that's really focused on performance. And what they actually do is they literally work every single week to mine opportunities, looking at people's behavior, things like this. So there's no shopping cart, right? Now if you go and try to buy a phone, you throw a phone in your cart, and then you leave because it's too complicated. You get a call, your wife is calling, whatever reason. When you go back, you have no way to get back to that. Now that's something that every single e-commerce site has in the world, basically. It's just built in. That is a best practice if there's any best practice in e-commerce. They don't have it. So one of the guys on the analytics team at Voda actually did a very, very simple split test with Test and Target, where they literally just created a link here that would get you, a customer who had thrown something in their basket, to just get back to your basket. Incredibly simple, very light UX and design, almost all driven by the analytics team. Massive results, huge results, right? Obsessive, weekly, kind of focused evolution and kind of optimization with new tools. And then you look at the iPad and you look at what Apple does. Secretive, massively secretive, massively complicated products. They don't seem complicated now because they're everywhere, obviously. But my God, to create the initial versions of these things, they really were just barely able to achieve it. And it was rumored, but yet no one really knew it was coming, or kind of the details of how it was built. But when you build products like this, hardware and software that are used by the number of people that obviously Apple uses, it is another type of problem. Also another type of problem, because if it is found out, certainly back then, it might have been rapidly adopted by competitors. It clearly was rapidly adopted by competitors when it came out. So time to market was really key, and secrecy was key. So, a final example, and I'll get to my point. GIFGAF is really interesting. Do you guys know about GIFGAF? How many people? Okay, cool. Short version. Head of brand at O2, Gav Thompson, is in Silicon Valley visiting all these startups and kind of Web 2.0 stuff and a lot of social networks in San Francisco. And he says, just has this epiphany on the plane. He's like, my God, what if there's a mobile network and it was just completely run by customers? That would be cool. And then he realizes, oh shit, I work at O2. They're never gonna fund that. That's like completely, that's not their business. That competes with their business. But he's passionate about the idea and he comes back and he pitches it. He says, we gotta go do this. This is really interesting. And someone at O2 listens to him. And so a new company is formed to essentially go compete with O2. Now it uses O2's network, so obviously it's making money for O2. But it's interesting in that if it does really, really well, it should kick O2's ass. I don't think that'll happen, but I think it's an interesting example for sure. So what I've been thinking a lot about, and the chapter in Naked Innovation that I'm kind of working on rewriting right now, is on decision making. And one aspect of decision making is about priority, and I'll get to that in a second. But I think that another aspect I'm kind of starting to realize more and more is actually it's not about priority at all. It's about what is the appropriate development and design process that you need to send this kind of idea down to go be realized successfully in the world. And this is very rough, so forgive me, this is the beta part. At the end of the day, there are still things that are mostly waterfall. And if you get into Rolls-Royce or GE and you're doing aircraft engines or Boeing, they better be waterfall. A lot of that needs to be waterfall. It needs to have ridiculously rigorous, very carefully controlled stage gates. And the reason is because we do things like get in, as the presenter was talking about yesterday, we get in giant tins and then we go in the air. So we have to make sure that any mistakes need to be found out before we're in the air, needless to say. But there's this whole thing where there's things that, like waterfall, which can start to be more lean, and then there's other methods that start to combine waterfall and agile into a kind of interesting hybrid agile model Then there's optimization that's happening all the time, kind of business as usual. Then there are pilots that are really interesting and might be handled another way. And then there's actually lean startups themselves. And so if you think about how project management, design and development, and kind of the collaboration works in those types of kind of processes, they're fundamentally different. There's similarities, but there's a lot that's different too. And kind of broadly, you on kind of one side, you have heavily deterministic, kind of big upfront design, lower kind of real-time collaboration often, a big kind of dip in that ROI curve at the beginning, and on the right side, you have very light dips into investment, and it's far more evolutionary, just in time, and requires a type of real-time collaboration that, frankly, most companies are actually not built to sustain if they're at scale. And so what I've been thinking about a lot recently is if you're a lead thinker, as a UX thinker in a large corporation, this is not true of startups, so I'm just going to say that now. So please, Mr. Startup person, don't come to me at the end of the presentation and berate me for this. But if you're in a large company and you have a lot of things you can do and there are a lot of resources, you have to start being a little bit better. We, as a practice, have to be a little bit better at maybe not being so pedantic about having one process, but instead kind of flesh out multiple types of processes that different projects or opportunities could flow through. And I think that that's a real opportunity that we need to kind of evolve to the next step in our evolution. Because let's face it, we're a young discipline. This comes partially from some thinking from Larry Keeley, who's head of a company called Doblin Group, and teaches a class at the Institute of Design where I attended and also teach. And it's design planning, kind of innovation planning, and he talks a lot about separating concepts from execution. And we all kind of talk about that and what is strategy, and there's a lot of difficult words. What's design? What's strategy? What's innovation? Let's table that all for a moment. And let's just say for a moment, we can have intent around issues or opportunities in our space, in our market, or maybe an area that we think our capabilities can actually be leveraged. And we're going to inform that with these types of methods. And we're going to create analytic frameworks to create kind of opportunities to explore more synthetically and more specifically by doing observational research or some quick ROI analysis or some light concept development and sketching, which will then allow us to do slightly better quick ROI kind of calculation and prioritization. And then we're going to come up with a whole series of potential initiatives. Optimization, some bigger bets, some things a little more evolutionary but still quite substantial. Maybe something that's like a platform shift that we have to do, but we still know what we're doing, like at M&S. Like we need to go recreate a commerce platform. It's not like we need to be lean about that. We know we have to do that. And then create a portfolio of things you can fast track, or kind of second priority, you can pilot, hold, or shop out, or you're eliminating. And this is kind of thinking that I'd already done. But the thing that I'm kind of now interested in saying is, or thinking about is how do we complement priority with process? And could you have an organization, and I'm talking to some of my clients about this now, and they're really engaged about it. And it's, hey, look, we're going to have some stuff that's fully funded as a program. Let's talk about what is our total budget. And then let's say, okay, cool, you want innovation? Great. Let's put a budget for things we're going to optimize or we're going to pilot and test that might be very interesting. And then let's also take, if your budget is 10 million quid or whatever it is, let's take 10% of that and consider using it as spinning out companies with the best ideas that we think are never going to happen in our organization. Because the reality is, the reason that most innovation doesn't happen is because there's no willingness for organizations to change. And innovation is about creative destruction. It is about fundamentally unseating what is in place in the institution. So, scary for companies, but also pretty exciting. And it can happen. And who knows, maybe there are more companies who will be more like an Intuit and will be willing to kind of actually do it in-house and kind of accommodate that type of potential damage and kind of damage to their core product. Like, I mean, Apple's another example where they killed the Mini. It was their most successful iPod ever, and they killed it to introduce the Nano, which didn't come out for 3 more months. They literally killed it. They didn't sell a product for months. And they had massive pent-up demand. The Nano went on to be the most selling iPod ever. And it's that kind of rigorous ability to kind of manage a portfolio, which is one of the key things that's made Apple successful. And how can we help companies, certainly as we become more senior, not just go do projects, but have portfolios of initiatives and really programs of multiple things happening at different speeds and at different levels. So just a couple more thoughts. That's not to say that lean thinking is not great, because one, it's as I kind of start off by saying, it's thank God for it. I also made fun of Eric in Lean Startup a little bit, because it is kind of getting to be a little bit like St. Eric. It's the people I meet who do Lean Startup stuff are just they're kind of like the first generation Scrum Masters. It's like, I mean, I love them, but at the same time, guys, like, there are multiple ways to skin a cat, and we should consider them, because different organizations and different problems and opportunities require that kind of agility. And I'll point to Carl over here and say the fact that he's sort of was talking before about, hey, step to your client and recognize that you need to be flexible. Now you need to have some good strong rigor around how you do things, but you also have to figure out how you can get the rigorous stuff done while still working with an organization. So here are some things. I didn't come up with these things. I modified them slightly. And the link is there, and I have all the references in the back. So here are kind of some things that whether it's waterfall or it's a lean startup, we can all do these things. These are good things, and you can do it if you're waterfall too. And I have 1 minute left, which is good because I'm basically done. In conclusion, 3 points. This was a talk where I am thinking a lot about what it is like to be a senior person, a senior UX person in a large organization with a lot of opportunities. Joe's presentation yesterday was incredible on Songkick and the stuff that's happening there, and that's absolutely the way you need to approach that size of company. But when you're in a company with many divisions, many departments, and you're global, you do need to think a little differently. So we need to get beyond mastery of a single process. There are many approaches, and so let's not absolve ourselves of the things that we knew that were actually good, and let's just figure out how we can use them to work to our advantage. And then let's map opportunities to kind of the process and organizational context, which kind of best suits it. And I would leave with just one final thing, and that's, it's a really exciting time to be in this field. This is Clement Mock. He was a chief creative officer of Sapient when we bought his company many years ago. He doesn't work with the company anymore, but he had founded Studio Archetype, and before that he was one of the leading designers in the UI of Apple. And he famously said the experience is the brand, and that is like us. That is, it is our time, and that is really fantastic. There are references; they will be included, and so you can read up a lot more on that stuff. And thank you.
Thank you.